struck me this week looking at these lessons, and last week and the week before that is a theme of fear. You know, Jesus appears to his disciples on those first Easter Sunday and the week after, and the first thing he says is either "do not be afraid" or "peace be with you." And it makes sense that those disciples were afraid, right? We can really identify with that. They were afraid because, well, they were afraid it might happen to them too. Jesus was killed, and they might be killed because they're close friends and associated with him. And then when they see Jesus, they're afraid. At first they think it's a ghost. They don't know what they're seeing, and they're afraid of what is new. And then thirdly, they're afraid when they realize who Jesus is, that it is something that is totally new. Talk about change. This is beyond change. This is recreation, life from death. So, if we were in their sandals, of those first disciples, we would feel fear too. Fear for our lives, fear of the unknown, and fear from having our lives being completely transformed. Fear of the new. Well, at first glance, our Bible readings today kind of seem about Jesus as a good shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep. And yet I think fear is at the core of all our readings of the Bible too today. That first reading from Acts 4, I don't know if you caught the backstory that's kind of in between the lines, but Peter and John had been arrested and were standing before the officials of the council as prisoners. And the reason why is they had just healed a crippled man who had been begging outside the temple. They had done a good deed. They had healed a man who was sick. So why were they arrested for this? Well, if we go back a couple verses to verse 2 in that same chapter, we read that the Sadducees were annoyed, that's the word that's used, annoyed, because Peter and John were proclaiming Jesus is the resurrection of the dead, and that they had healed this crippled man, healing him to new life, raising him up, literally, from the floor up, and connecting their actions with these words. They were annoyed because it went against everything they believed and taught. So what happens when the belief you have is challenged, or worse, shown to be untrue? Is it just anger? Or is it fear that motivates the reaction? It's something totally new. It's not what you believed. It challenges the core of the beliefs. We also heard Psalm 23 this morning. You read it. And they're words of comfort and assurance. And right there in the middle, it talks about fearing no evil, even when things are bad, and even when we walk through dark valleys. We're not to fear. That's that second fear that the disciples had. What were they actually seeing? Were they going to be arrested too? And then in 1 John, we are to be reassured that whenever our hearts condemn us, that was in verse 20 and 19, we are to remember that God is greater than our hearts. It's talking there about our actions and our words, and to love in deed as well as word. It's like when you have some things, and yet you don't give to those who are in need. It talks about our hearts condemning us. It's like those moments in our lives when we see something and we realize that, oh, we didn't do what we could have done. And maybe you've ever felt that, where your heart kind of sinks. Oh, I could have done something there. That's, in a way, what I think of what they're saying here, our hearts condemning us in those moments. And yet here too, that heart-sick feeling, we aren't to be afraid, because we know that God is greater than our hearts. So, how do we react when we realize something was wrong? Well, some people beat themselves up. Some people are afraid to admit they're wrong. Some people attack the other who points out the mistake, which is what happened to the disciples with the Sadducees. Some people huddle in fear of God, that God is going to judge them. But the truth is we're not to fear because God is love. And it's all about that Jesus laid down his life for us. And that is what Jesus was doing. Not only in word, I love you, but in action. Laying it down. Laying down all those feelings and misgivings and doubts. And trusting that God's love will help encourage us to go further. That whatever we feel is not what is real. That Jesus' love is what is real. And that's what we're to focus on. It means that God is forgiving us and overcoming all the fears that we might have in doing what is right and acting with love. The gospel is making the same connection of reassuring us in love and helping us overcome fear. That Jesus does lay down the life for us. And that's why I went back a half a verse and read about the abundant life. That the reason Jesus came is to give us abundant life. And that doesn't mean a life full of rich things or making sure that we always have food on our table or a roof over our head, but something more. Do you know what it's like when you love someone? You give that love to them and the love grows. I think life abundant is the same thing. Because Jesus is connecting that love with abundant life. That when we give life, we even have that saying, right? It's more blessed to give than to receive. It seems to grow. That is what overcomes any of our shyness or fear or insecurities or whatever you want to call it. The feeling that we're wrong and it's too scary to say, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Trusting that giving of life, that giving of love is going to make it grow, not make it worse. It's scary. It's scary to do something new, and it's obvious that, to approach someone who has hurt you, or to approach a bully, or to approach or speak up against injustice, or to give to some stranger who might reject what you want to give them, or what you can give them. But it's all based in that love. And that's what we've got to focus on. The whole reason why we're here is that when we love one another as Christ still loves us, it grows. And that's why we can go out to our neighbors and our family and our friends and share that and trust that. That is the gift we have here as a congregation to give, all based in Jesus. And it's wonderful. And it means that we don't have to be perfect all the time because we have the perfect love of Christ.